Hello, by way of an introduction, my name is Katie Good. I am a solicitor at Fragment Law Firm. Fragment is the largest and leading immigration service provider in the world. And we've been invited by London Business Hub to speak about Brexit and the EU settlement scheme. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to London Business Hub for inviting us. So the purpose of this webinar is to talk about Brexit. So I'll be discussing the Brexit timeline and key dates, but I want to focus on the EU settlement scheme and how an individual can make an application. And we'll also talk through some scenarios at the end. So in terms of what happens next, so after Brexit, so the UK left the EU on the 31st of January 2020. And we're currently in the Brexit transition period, which will run until the 31st of December 2020. And during this time, EEA and Swiss nationals will retain free movement rights in the UK, which in practice means that they can enter the UK and can work, live and study without applying for a visa or any kind of permission. However, apart from Irish nationals, EEA and Swiss nationals in the UK before the end of the transition period, so before 31st of December 2020, will need to make an application under the EU settlement scheme by the 30th of June 2021. So they have to be resident in the UK by 31st of December 2020. And we'll talk about how this process works in practice. But in very simple terms, if an individual has been in the UK for a period of 5 continuous years, they'll be eligible to apply for settled status. And if they've been in the UK for less than 5 years, they can apply for pre-settled status. Like I said, we'll go through the process in detail, but for eligible applicants, they should be able to use the app, which means they won't have to surrender their passport, and the applicants will be able to travel whilst the application is processing. There will also be a similar policy which will apply to UK nationals in Europe, but the process will vary between member states. So for the purposes of this webinar, I'm just going to focus on EU nationals who are currently in the UK. So just before we get into the process, I just wanted to explain the process for Irish nationals. So Brexit won't change their status. They will automatically be deemed with held settled status in the UK at entry. So they won't need to apply via the EU settlement scheme. But they may wish to obtain settled status if they're sponsoring non-EU family members, as it makes their application a little bit easier because they can provide the unique application reference number of the Irish national as part of their application, but it is not mandatory. Irish nationals can apply for British citizenship if they satisfy the relevant requirements. So in terms of EEA nationals, so this is essentially nationals of Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. The UK government has negotiated separately with Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein and Switzerland. EEA and Swiss nationals will still be able to apply under the EU settlement scheme since its inception on the 30th of March 2019, and they will be able to obtain pre-settled or settled status, as is the case for any EU national. So this is what the process looks like in very brief terms. We'll go into it in a lot more detail, but just on the basis of being an EU national, they would need their passport, their original passport with their biometric chip. They can make the application using the app, which can be downloaded onto an Android or an iPhone 7 and above, or an iPad or computer. Their application will have an initial assessment based upon their national insurance number, if an applicant has one, by the HMRC, to see how long they've been paying tax for. And like I said before, they'll be granted either pre-settled or settled status. But the applicant will have the opportunity to upload additional evidence of residence if they've been here for longer than their tax records show. So for non-EU national family members, they are still eligible to apply under the scheme as long as their relationship to that EU national existed by the 31st of December 2020. They will have to meet the criminality threshold. And if they will be entering after the 31st of December, that's fine. But the EU national will have to make an application under the scheme. And then the non-EU national, if they are not in the UK, will need to apply for a family permit first. But if they are in the UK, then they can make the application potentially in the same way as EU nationals, and we'll talk about the difference in a little bit. If the relationship to the qualifying EU national did not exist by the 31st of December 2020, the individual, so the non-EU national, cannot make an application under the EU settlement scheme. They will need to apply under the immigration rules and the new immigration system, which is due to come into effect on the 1st of December. The only exception to this rule is for children who were born after the 31st of December 2020, so they can still apply under the scheme. So just in terms of the documents that applicants should be prepared to have when they're making these applications. So for EU nationals, they'll obviously need their mobile phone with the app. They need to have access to email so that they can verify their email address as part of the process. They'll need their original valid biometric passport, their national insurance number if they have one, and also need to be prepared to provide proof of residence, which we'll discuss in more detail a little bit later. For non-EU family members, it's essentially the same, but they'll also need to provide evidence of their relationship to their EU sponsor who is residing in the UK, and we'll discuss this in further detail later on in the webinar. But if a non-EU family member has already been issued with a biometric residence permit or a biometric residence card in the UK, then they are eligible to use the app as well. If they don't have a residence card, then their process will be slightly different, and I'll talk about the differences a little bit later. So for EU nationals or for non-EU nationals who have a residence card or a residence permit, the first thing they need to do is download the app. This is called the EU Exit ID Document Check app, and an example of what it will look like is on the screen there. It's free to download, and like I said before, you just need to make sure that you have the updated software and that your iPhone has to be at least an iPhone 7 or above. So the app is essentially providing evidence of your identity. So the first thing you have to do is create your profile. So you will scan your passport, which is the photo page in your passport, and then you will need to provide your contact number and your email address. And a PIN will then be sent to either your phone or your email, which will then allow you to essentially log into your portal. You will then check the identity document. So this essentially means that you place the device on the passport or residence card so it can access the biometric chip, and it will collate all of the information that it has on there and display it on the screen for you to check. You will also have to scan your face, and you have to take a photo, so you have to take a selfie. And you can take as many photos as you want, but once you're ready to, you can submit it. And this process takes about 10 minutes. But once you've completed the identity check, it will provide you with a link which you need to click on, and that will then take you to the online application form. As part of the process, you'll receive another email where you'll have to verify your email address as part of the process, and you must do that before you submit the online form. So in order to access your online application form, you won't have a password. You will log in with your passport number, which you used as part of the identity check, your date of birth, and then you'll be able to send a code to either your text or to your phone or to your emails, and then you will add in that one-time code, which will then take you to the landing page where you'll be able to see the steps that you've already completed, which will be the identity check, and then the outstanding steps which you'll need to complete as part of the online application form. The online application form is very simple in terms of the questions that it will ask you. So it will ask, firstly, about your nationality and whether you have dual nationality, and if you do, you will have to input that information. It will also ask if you have any previous nationalities. In terms of the application as well, it will ask if you've ever had a valid UK permanent residence card. And this will be applicable for those who have been in the UK for a long time and they have been previously issued with a permanent residence card under the old regulations. Now, this will either be a card or it will be a stamp in your passport. If you don't have that, that's fine. You just click no. And it will also ask you if you've ever been granted indefinite leave to remain. And again, you'll usually have a stamp in your passport or it will be confirmed in a residence permit. So then for non-EU national family members, there'll be an additional question and it will ask whether your sponsor has applied for settled status. Now, your sponsor is your EU family member. If they have, then it's a lot quicker for the Home Office to process. You would just put in their details, so their name and their surname, and their application reference number that they'll get once they submit the application form. If your EU national has not submitted an application, you will need to provide evidence that they have been residing in the UK. So say, for example, a utility bill. It can take a little longer to process, so where possible, we would advise that the EU national applies first. And this is just an example of what it will look like once you complete the first step. It's called the application type. You'll have an opportunity to review all of your answers before proceeding to the next section. So then this will go on to residents in the UK. So the first step is the applicant will be asked to provide their national insurance number. If you don't have a national insurance number, that's absolutely fine, but you will need to provide additional information to prove your UK residence later on in the application. The reason why they ask for this is because they conduct a primary assessment with the HMRC to see your tax records as a kind of initial assessment to see how long you've been in the UK and to determine if you're eligible for settled status or pre-settled status. If you don't have consistent tax records, then again, they'll ask you for further evidence of UK residence. Then you will move on to criminal convictions. So they will ask you if you've ever, they'll ask you to declare any criminal convictions or if you've been involved in any terrorist activities. And then you'll be given an opportunity to upload additional evidence of residence as part of the application. So the Home Office provide a very comprehensive list of the acceptable documents which you can provide. They recommend that you provide evidence which covers a longer period of time to reduce the amount of documents that you would have to provide, and they provide examples of this. Say, for example, if you had annual bank statements or a council tax bill that was provided for the entire 12 months. But it is possible to provide alternative evidence. Say, for example, if you had a bank statement or a utility bill. Now, if you're applying for pre-settled status, say, for example, that you had arrived within the last 6 months, you can just provide evidence of a used flight ticket and or a bank statement which shows evidence of UK spending. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have a UK bank account. It can be a foreign bank account, but as long as you've, say, for example, bought a coffee or a pastry from a coffee shop, you can provide evidence of that to show that you're in the UK. They do also helpfully provide examples of unacceptable evidence, which would include, unfortunately, photos from the UK. That unfortunately wouldn't work. So initially, you can only upload 10 documents, but if the Home Office need more documents or more evidence of your residence, they will not reject the application. They will contact you directly via email and ask you to upload additional evidence of residence. And they usually specify the specific period which they're looking for. So then you may need to provide evidence of relationship. So this will be applicable for non-EEA nationals. Will need to provide evidence of their relationship to an EU family member. And it will also apply for dependents. So, for example, a child under the age of 18 who is looking to rely upon the main applicant's residence. So as part of that, you will just need to provide either a marriage certificate or a birth certificate as part of that application. And this slide explains it in a little bit more detail. So obviously, spouse and a civil partner would be a marriage or civil partnership certificate. Children under the age of 21, a birth certificate. And if an individual is applying on the basis of being a durable partner, so i.e. they've been living together for a 2-year period, you will need to provide evidence of that period of cohabitation for the full 2-year period. So then once you've done all of that, you will have an opportunity to review all of the answers. So you would click Submit Answers once you are ready to proceed to the next step. It will then ask you for 3 security questions, and this is if the Home Office ever need to contact you about the application, they may ask for the answers of one of these questions. There'll be personal questions, say for example, it will ask what was the name of your first pet or first car, so it's recommended to write the answers down so you don't forget them. And then once you've submitted those answers, the Home Office will undertake an automated check of the UK tax and benefits record using the NI number provided. If you think you are eligible for settled status, you can say that you have been here for 5 years or more, and that's when you will have the opportunity to upload additional evidence of UK residence. So you should have that as a PDF on your computer, or you can take photos of it if you're applying from your phone. And you will need to provide the dates for the period that document covers. So you'll assign a specific date or a date period for each document that you're uploading. So then the application will be sent to the Home Office, and you will shortly after the application's been approved, you'll receive an email which will contain the certificate of application. Now this just confirms receipt of the valid application under the EU settlement scheme, and it confirms that you'll receive a decision shortly. In terms of how this will differ, if an individual is a non-EU national who doesn't have a residence card or a residence permit in the UK, they won't be able to use the app. So they will complete an online application form first, which can be found on the Home Office website. And once they submit an application form, they will then be redirected to the Home Office's third-party provider, which is called Soprasteria, where they will need to book an appointment at a visa application centre in the UK, where they will submit their biometrics. So they'll have their photo and their fingerprints taken. And once they've attended their appointment, that's when they'll receive the certificate of application. And as part of their application, as mentioned before, they'll need to provide evidence of their relationship. And if they're not able to use the app, they'll also need to provide a digital photo. So in terms of the approval, it's received by email. The EA nationals will not receive a physical document to prove their status. They will receive an attachment which provides for an approval letter. But it's really important to note that their status will be recorded electronically on the Home Office system and will be linked to their passport. Non-EA nationals will receive a biometric residence permit unless they already have a residence card, which was issued under the regulations. But otherwise, they will receive one approximately 7 to 10 working days after they receive approval. So both EA nationals and non-EA nationals will have an online profile, which is where they can send proof of their status to employers or landlords. They'll also be able to view their status, understand their rights, but also importantly update their details. Now this is particularly important for EA nationals, that if they apply for a new passport, they need to make sure that they update their details on the online portal, because then their status, either pre-settled or settled status, will be transferred to their new passport. They should have no issues with re-entering the UK post 30th of June 2021. And this will also be the case if you had a new number or a new email address, because that's how you access your online profile. It's the same as if you were logging into your online application. You would need your passport number, your date of birth, and then a code will be sent to the phone. So it's really important that the details are updated in order to protect your status in the UK. So sending proof of status in the UK, this can be done on the online portal, as I mentioned. You would just click Proving Your Rights, and you have an opportunity to share your status, which proves that you have the right to work. So you would just provide your employer's email address. They will receive an email which contains the specific share code for the individual applying, and a link to the website where they can carry out the right to work check. Upon receipt of the share code, they will also need to enter the individual's date of birth for data privacy reasons and the company name. They'll then receive an instant verification notice. So in terms of what happens when you get the status, so if you had pre-settled status and you want to apply for settled status once you've completed 5 continuous years, that is possible. But the 5 continuous years of residence means that you can't spend more than 6 months outside of the UK in any 12-month period. Unless you have a single absence of less than 12 months, this will be permitted if it's for an important reason, say, for example, childbirth or overseas posting somewhere or due to sickness. But importantly, this can only be one single absence. To maintain settled status, so once you've been granted settled status, you can't spend more than 5 consecutive years outside of the UK, or if you are a Swiss national, this will be 4 consecutive years. But this means in practice that if you were to travel back to the UK for a day and then you were to leave again, your 5-year clock would start again. To maintain pre-settled status, you can't leave for more than 2 consecutive years, but obviously you'd also have to be mindful of the fact that if you did want to remain in the UK long term and apply for settled status, you have to make sure that you have that 5 years continuous residence. It's also noted there in terms of settled status that if an individual was issued with permanent residency under the old regulations, they need to make sure that they reapply for settled status to transfer their status across to the new system, and they have to make that application by the 30th of June 2021. So just finally, in terms of what happens if you get stuck with the application or you want to inquire about a pending application, the Home Office do have an EU Settlement Resolution Centre, which you can call, and the details are provided on the screen there. They will likely ask for your full name and potentially answers to some of those security questions that we talked about earlier. And if your application is already pending and you want a decision, they'll ask for your unique application reference number, which is included on your certificate of application. So that's the EU settlement scheme in a nutshell. I hope that was helpful. And again, I just wanted to say a big thank you to the London Business Hub for inviting us to speak. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.